And with Second Amendment politics swirling, our next guest is Eric Pratt, Senior Vice President of Gun Owners of America. And we're happy to have him on to discuss. Eric Pratt, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
Absolutely. Eric, it didn't take long for the politicization of this shooting to kick in. Why do you think that is?
Well, obviously the left is all about pushing gun control. And so with this, it's absolutely disgusting what they're doing. I mean, they're pushing gun control. They're fundraising off of this within hours of the shooting. And really, it's despicable because it becomes clear they only care about certain deaths. For example, more than 40 people have been shot and killed in Chicago this month. In the last 30 days in Baltimore, there have been 20 people shot and killed. But the left is not talking about that. They're not fundraising off of Chicago or Baltimore because they already have very strict gun control. Those cities don't serve their cause. They have red flag gun confiscation orders. They have universal background registration checks. They have so-called assault weapons bans. They have everything that the left is trying to push on us, and yet they have murders out the wazoo in those two cities that they can't control it. And what that tells us, obviously, is that gun control is not the answer. But, it's the old saying about, just double, what's the definition of insanity, and just doubling down even when it doesn't work. That's exactly what the left is doing.
Eric, in certain parts of the country, there's, guns, just the topic of guns is taboo. In the Northeast, many cities where I'm from, in New England, people think guns are for cops and crooks, and that's about it. What do you say to the city dwellers on the East Coast who think that there should be an assault rifle ban?
Well, first of all, I would say, look, a killer can use any instrument to incur a mass killing. I mean, he or she could use fertilizer in a truck, all right? I mean, that's like what the Oklahoma City bomber used to kill 168 people. Or it could just be a truck all by itself, like what a guy in France did to use, he ran over and murdered 86 people. So the whole idea of blaming a certain instrument is short-sighted, because no law that bans a certain object is going to stop an evil, determined heart from killing. What's amazing, and this is one of the things that the anti-gun left does, is they only talk about certain uses of a firearm which fit their narrative when they're used in a bad way, but then they won't talk about firearms when they're actually used to stop mass shootings. The day after the Texas shooting, there was an attempted mass shooting at a West Virginia. It was a birthday/graduation party. And thankfully, there was a woman there with a concealed carry permit. She shot back, fatally wounded the guy. He died. That stopped the attack. Besides West Virginia, who else is talking about this? See, this is the very point where the media gins up opposition by only selectively talking about certain stories. And really, that's well, certainly is a disgrace, but that should be as much of the story as what the left-wing media, how they try to control the narrative.
Eric, to your point, in 2019, we saw what happened in Texas, where a madman was about to open fire in a church when a retired FBI agent pulled out his concealed weapon and killed the shooter, neutralizing him. Are there more types of these cases? You just mentioned one, and we just don't hear much about them.
Yes. And in fact, a lot of times where there has been a lot of killing, tragically, a lot of times they are brought to an end by a good guy with a gun. One of the guys who works with us, his name is Stephen Williford. It was also in a Texas church. Now, sadly, everyone at that church in Sutherland Springs did not have a gun on that day except for the bad guy. But when Stephen Williford, who lived down the street, heard the shooting, he ran out of his house barefoot with his AR-15, called the guy out of the church. The guy came out, and Stephen mortally wounded him. I mean, the guy got in his car, drove off, but eventually took his own life because he was wounded so bad. So there are, in fact, the FBI cited that case and many other cases as examples where armed citizens use guns to stop attempted mass murders. I think it's really important to point out that in most cases, these killers will try to seek out a location where it's a gun-free zone. 81% of police agree that teachers and staff should be armed, and with good reason, because no school has ever had a mass shooting where there were armed teachers and staff. But tragically, that wasn't the case at the Texas school. Police were reportedly not quick to rush in, and this Texas school, didn't take part in the program that allows teachers to be armed. So it was a gun-free zone. And again, that's what killers often choose to target. And why would 94% of mass shooters target gun-free zones? Because they don't want bullets being fired back at them. That's why they don't target police stations or gun shows, because killers love gun control. And sadly, that's what enabled this killer in Texas.
Eric Pratt, thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thanks again, Steve.
China and Russia vetoed a United Nations resolution by the United States to impose tough new sanctions on North Korea. The sanctions are in response to North Korea's continued launches of intercontinental ballistic missiles, otherwise known as ICBMs. The missiles can be used for nuclear weapons. The 15-member Security Council voted 13-2. This marks a first in serious division over North Korea's sanctions among the 5 permanent members of the Security Council with veto power. These include China, Russia, France, the UK, and the US. To pass, the resolution needs 9 votes from the Council and 0 vetoes from the 5 countries with veto power.
We will not stay silent. We will not ignore these threats, just as we will not ignore the horrific human rights violations and abuses happening in the DPRK, including the abduction issue.
In Washington, D.C., the pharmaceutical lobby, otherwise known as Big Pharma, wields a big stick in terms of its influence on Capitol Hill. Adam Andrzejewski is CEO of OpenTheBooks.com, and he's been following this closely. Here's a look. Adam Andrzejewski, thank you so much for joining us in the Capitol Report.
Well, thank you. Good to be here.
Adam, you recently wrote an article where you claim to uncover a close relationship between pharmaceutical companies and the NIH and their scientists and what you're calling royalty payments that are being made. Please tell us exactly what you uncovered here.
Well, we believe that transparency is transformational and can revolutionize United States public policy and politics. And I know of no better example and where to start than the National Institutes of Health. We just uncovered a royalty payment stream that previously has been hidden from the people, the press, the pundits, from the politicians. And over a decade, we estimate that royalty stream at the National Institutes of Health adds up to $350 million. These are royalty payments from third-party payers, think pharmaceutical companies, back to the agency and 1,700 of its scientists. And every single one of those payments could be a potential conflict of interest.
So, Adam, what exactly does this mean from an ethics standpoint? And if there is a conflict of interest, where does that lie?
Well, it could be pay to play. It could be greenlighting pharmaceutical drugs because you have a financial interest in them. The last time this third-party paid royalty database at NIH had sunshine was 2005. The Associated Press filed a Freedom of Information Act request and got the entire database. Within that database, they found, and it was a scandal, that Dr. Anthony Fauci had been receiving royalties. He's the head of his institute at the National Institutes of Health. The drug, an experimental AIDS drug, had been funded to the tune of $36 million of taxpayer money. So was this drug, all the different pay-to-pay questions and ethical questions came to the forefront regarding Dr. Anthony Fauci. And he admitted that it is a potential conflict of interest and that he was concerned about it. And he also said that he was on a forward basis going to donate those royalties to charity. But obviously over the last 17 years, the issue disappeared from the public eye and nobody knows if he actually donated those either.
Adam, you said that Fauci continues to receive NIH-approved perks without a lot of accountability in your article. You gave an example that in February of 2021, Fauci received a $1 million prize from a foundation in Israel. What types of questions might this raise?
Well, is Dr. Anthony Fauci operating in a public interest, or is he operating in his own special interest? In regards to the $1 million prize from the Dan David Foundation in Israel, it was given specifically to Dr. Anthony Fauci and approved by the National Institutes of Health for the reason of, quote unquote, speaking truth to power during the Trump administration. Now, we have reviewed a very basic job description provided by NIH on Dr. Anthony Fauci's position as director, and nowhere in there is public affairs. And the law since 1913, it's called the Gillette Amendment, specifically bars the propagandist, the federal bureaucrat that is engaged in propaganda. And so does this admission violate the Gillette Amendment? And there needs to be a legal opinion on it.
I mean, to your point, we know Washington, D.C., the money is washed in obscure ways. When you have extremely powerful health officials potentially being paid large amounts of money, does it raise questions of who might be behind the money and what their intentions are?
Well, absolutely. And that's why in this $350 million decades long database of royalty payments from third parties, we need a lot more transparency. I'm going to give you two examples. Although we know the top line numbers in this database, and we know the scientists' names like Anthony Fauci, like Francis Collins, the former director of NIH, those folks receiving the royalties. We know 1,700 scientists receive those royalties. We actually don't know the individual amounts paid to those scientists because they were redacted, erased. We also don't know the name of the third-party payer, think pharmaceutical company that paid the royalties, because the name of the payer has been erased and redacted as well.
Adam Andrzejewski, thank you.
Thank you.
The Justice Department is sticking to a previous decision not to charge two former FBI agents who mishandled an investigation into convicted sex offender Larry Nassar. Despite the decision, the Justice Department admits agents did not properly handle the investigation. Nassar is the former doctor of the USA Gymnastics national team. Allegations of Nassar's abuse were reported to the FBI's Indianapolis field office by the president of the USA Gymnastics in 2015. He was named in hundreds of lawsuits by female athletes who said that he had abused them. A report by the Justice Department's watchdog found local agents failed to respond with the urgency that the allegations deserved and required. Furthermore, the report found that two FBI officials lied during their interviews to cover up or minimize their errors. Nassar was sentenced to up to 175 years in prison. Despite the high gas prices, millions of Americans are still planning on traveling at least 50 miles away from home the Memorial Day weekend.
We are forecasting about 39.2 million people are going to be traveling for this Memorial Day holiday period, which is about 5 days. And about 88% of those folks are going to be going by car.
The number of estimated travelers is up 8.3% from 2021 and would be close to 2017 levels, but it would still be below pre-pandemic 2019 levels, which was a peak year for travel. AAA says they've never had a Memorial Day travel period where so many people are traveling by car while gas prices are so high. According to AAA, the average gas price hit $4.60 per gallon. And in California, home to the nation's highest gas prices, it topped $6 per gallon. Jim Burkhardt, head of the oil market research at S&P Global, says he wouldn't expect much relief from the pump this summer.